Today we're going to read out of Kicked Out of Heaven, the Untold History of the White Races, circa 700 to 1700 AD. Here is a section of the types of criminals that were in Old Europe. Let me read. In the year 1574, Klaus Rinkhart of Faulsdorf, a murderer who committed 3 murders with an associate. First, he shot dead his companion. Secondly, a miller's man who helped him to attack and plunder a mill by night. The third case was again at a mill called the Fox Mill on the mountains, which he attacked at night with a companion. They shot the miller dead, did violence to the miller's wife and the maid, obliged them to fry some eggs in fat, and laid these on the dead miller's body, then forced the miller's wife to join in eating them. He kicked the miller's body and said, "Miller, how do you like this morsel?" He also plundered the mill. For these things he was executed on the wheel at grates. In the year 1577, Nicholas Stuller of Atzfeld, alias Schwartz Cracker, a murderer, with his companions Phila and Gorgla von Sonberg, he committed 8 murders. First, he shot a horse soldier. Secondly, he cut open a pregnant woman alive, in whom was a dead child. Thirdly, he again cut open a pregnant woman, in whom was a female child. Fourthly, he once more cut open a pregnant woman, in whom were 2 male children. Gorgla von Somberg said they had committed a great sin, and that he would take the infants to a priest to be baptized. But Phila said he would himself be priest and baptize them. So he took them by the legs and dashed them to the ground. For these deeds, he, Stuller, was drawn out on a sledge at Bamberg, his body torn thrice with red-hot tongs, and then he was executed on the wheel. In the year 1578, August 12th, Stefan Hatzelin, alias Der Laufenholzer, wire drawer at Lof, who accused George Schwindel, a counselor there, saying he had seen him commit lewdness with 4 women. His father, Hans Hatzelin, whose fingers were struck off, bore witness in the matter, the father saying it happened under an oak tree, the son, on the contrary, under a fir tree. The accusation was made through jealousy, which he confessed in prison, he having previously killed a man and also robbed several burghers and a woman of Lof of their reputation and honor, beheaded with the sword at Nuremberg. That's Nuremberg, Germany. These are the type of executioners. And their masks, as you can see. So, apart from the Scharfrichter generally supplied some of the articles necessary to carry out his duties, such as ropes, brimstone, wood, etc., and on these he also allowed to make a reasonable profit. Then too many of the craft practiced surgery, and sold at a high price severed hands, human skin, and other ghastly relics valued by the superstitious for the purposes of magic, medicine, or the discovery of hidden treasure. As executions were carried out in public, it was important that they should not be bungled, but mistakes were not infrequent, and on such occasions the Scharfrichter and his subordinate were often in danger at the hands of the crowd. The sick and the feeble were conveyed to execution in chairs. Heinous or violent criminals were drawn thither on an oxide or on a wooden sledge, a hurdle. In such cases, it was considered a pious act to support the victim's head so as to prevent it from being bruised by the violent jolts. Members of charitable associations undertook this office. It would also appear that for conveying the condemned, carts were at times employed, drawn by horses borrowed from the night soil workers' teams. To the indignation of these men, apparently the animals were at one time ridden in a ribald fashion by several people, but later this practice was considered unseemly and strictly forbidden. It is true that occasionally a man or woman fell into the executioner's hands on a charge of sorcery, but the Nuremberg Council, as they stated in a letter written to Ulm in 1531, never believed in witches and therefore took no other measures against such persons than to banish them from their territory. When 72 witches were hanged or burnt in the neighboring town of Ellingen in 1591, the Nuremberg Council, despite great popular indignation, forbade the torture of an old woman accused of witchcraft and ordained that no criminal process should be set in motion against persons accused on mere report, and that any authority so offending should be held liable to be called to account by the accused party for injury and be cast in costs and damages. An executioner's assistant who tried to cast suspicion of sorcery on the wives of certain citizens was incontinently beheaded. In the year 1614, Franz Schmidt's second successor, Valentin Dusser, was discharged from his post on account of his slovenly workmanship. He had the misfortune to miss the poor woman, so that she fell down twice from the chair, and on his way home he would have been stoned to death if the town guard had not come to his help in the nick of time. These are the swords that were used by executioners. The poor sinner was very ill and weak, so that she had to be led to the Krippelstein, and when she had sat down upon the chair, Master Valten, the hangman, walked around her like a cat round a hot broth, and held the sword a span from her neck, and took aim, and then struck the blow, and missed her neck, and struck off a piece of her head as big as $1, and struck her down from the chair. Then the poor soul got up quicker. Then she began to beg that she should be allowed to go, because she had been so brave, but all in vain, and she had to sit down again. Then the assistant, wanted to take the sword from Master Valtin and strike with it himself, but the master would not allow, and himself struck a second blow somewhat stronger, so that she again fell to the ground, and then he cut off her head as she lay upon the scaffold. Whereupon he, the hangman, had his reward as he went home, for he would soon have been stoned to death if the armed town guard had not rescued him, inasmuch as the blood was already streaming from his head. These are the red-hot pincers that were used. They would be set into the fire until they were red hot to tear the sinews, which are muscle strands, from the bodies of criminals or those who are convicted to receive punishment by pincers. Punishment was done in various ways, whatever the court or the judge would agree upon as a consequence for the criminal's acts. And once again, these are the types of swords that the executioners use. It is most important to note that they have square edges and not round. This one is most likely Islamic, as it has a curve, as these are European and are straight and have the square edge. All right, buy now, $50 for all 3 volumes of The Kicked Out of Heaven. That's volume 2 and that's volume 3. And this is volume 1. Buy now. Over 1,000 pictures.